Hello, whisperers. Welcome to the channel. If you enjoy tonight's tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It helps more than you know. Now, dim the lights, and let's begin tonight's story. I got home later than I meant to. That's not unusual, I know, but I'm saying it because the street was already shiny with rain, and the hall lights in my building were doing that thing again. Slow stutter, then a weak glow, like the world was breathing wrong. I could smell someone's dinner down the hall, garlic and something burnt. The elevator was out, so I took the stairs and listened to my steps echo like I was being followed by a second, lazier version of myself. On my door, near the bottom where the paint is chipped from moving boxes in and out, there was a shadow. Not a person, just the kind of shadow an envelope makes when it's pushed halfway through the slot and the corner snags. My keys scraped the lock, and I paused because the envelope had my name on it, my full name, middle initial even. Nobody does that unless it's a bill or a court thing. The paper was thick and yellowed the way books get when they're left in the sun too long. The ink looked real, not printed, black with a warm brown bleeding to the edges where someone didn't quite let it dry. I picked it up off the floor, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Smoke and lavender. The smoke wasn't that heavy, oily kitchen kind. It was the soft kind, the way an old coat smells when you pull it from a cedar chest, and it still remembers a winter night. The lavender wasn't fresh either. It had that dry, chalky push to it, like sachets you forget behind towels. I set everything on the little shoe cabinet by the door, keys in the ceramic bowl with a chip on the lip, wallet, phone. The apartment felt colder than it should have. I kicked off wet shoes and peeled off my coat. The radiator was making noise, but not doing much with it. I told myself I'd bleed it this weekend. I've told myself that before. I took the envelope to the kitchen because that's where the good light is. The overhead in the living room hums, and it's not a good hum. I got a butter knife from the drawer and slid it under the flap. The paper gave with a soft sigh. Inside was a single card, thick as a coaster, edged in a faint gold pattern that shimmered like it remembered how to be fancy. The wording was simple. You are cordially invited to the annual Blackwood Halloween Ball. October 31st, 1938, Blackwood Hotel Ballroom, 7 o'clock in the evening. Costumes encouraged. No RSVP number, no website, no clever hashtag. Just that script. Elegant, careful, a little shaky in the flourishes, like someone who used to have perfect penmanship and then got old but refused to give up. Okay, I said out loud, just to put a sound in the room that wasn't the radiator or the rain. Cute. I flipped it over. My name was there again on the back in the same black ink, with guest of honor written beneath in smaller letters. All right. I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. I carried the invitation into the living room and dropped onto the couch. Springs complained. The card felt cool in my hand, like it had been outside longer than the hallway. I looked at my phone out of habit. No new texts, no missed calls. No one was playing a joke that I could see. I took a photo of the front and did a reverse image search. Nothing. I typed Blackwood Halloween Ball into the search bar and got costume stores, Pinterest boards, one Etsy seller with a velvet cape, and a old college newsletter about a charity dance. Wrong city, wrong decade. I added 1938 and hotel in Blackwood and the name of my city. The results changed. Old headline scans, paywalled newspapers, a line in a blog from 10 years ago that said, "Nothing stands on the old Blackwood lot." It burned in 1939, and the city raised the rest a year later. The blog had 3 comments, all from 2013, and 2 were spam for bootleg DVDs. I opened a map and searched the address from one of the clippings. The pin dropped on a block I know, near the river. There's a dentist there now, and a sad little pizza place that always smells like wet cardboard. The map's satellite view showed a flat roof and a narrow alley, and nothing that looked like a ballroom with chandeliers. I zoomed out and back in like maybe I'd missed something hiding in the pixels. Why would anyone put my name on this? I thought. How would they even know where I live? I'm careful about my information. Not careful crazy, just careful enough. The building office doesn't hand out tenant names. My mailbox has the number, not my name. I turned the card in the lamplight. The gold border caught it and sent it skating across my palm like water. I checked the envelope again. No return address, no postage. Either hand-delivered or the world had started letting ghosts use the mail slot. I stood up because my body needed to move or I was going to sit and spiral. I went to the door, looked through the peephole. Empty hallway. Odd stain on the carpet that's been there since I moved in. I opened the door anyway and leaned out. The light at the far end flickered. Mrs. Holcomb across the hall has a wreath up already. Tiny pumpkins and a ribbon with glitter bats. The air smelled wet and old. No footfalls on the stairs. No voices. I shut the door and turned the deadbolt, and the sound of the bolt sliding home made me feel like I'd done something practical. I put the invitation on the coffee table. The table is too low for the couch. My knees never forgive me. I reached for the remote, thought better of it. I didn't want TV noise to turn this into nothing. That's how you lose weird things. You drown them in sitcom laughter, and 3 minutes later, they're just a story you tell badly. Instead, I went to the kitchen and made tea. Kettle on the coil, click. Heat blooming under metal. Steam ghosting up the cabinets I keep meaning to repaint. I watched the burner ring, go from dull to orange like a tiny sunrise, and tried to be a normal person thinking normal thoughts. I failed. I kept seeing the year, 1938, and that smell, smoke and lavender, had started to thread through the apartment again. I hadn't even put the card near my face. It just was. My phone buzzed. For a second, I thought the invitation had found a way to text me. And how stupid is that? It was you, actually. You coming to mix thing tomorrow? Costumes optional. I typed maybe and didn't send it. I made myself type, yeah, we'll see. Sent. Then I fished the invitation off the table and set it on the counter like I was scolding it for being in the wrong room. When the kettle screamed, I jumped hard enough to slosh water. The sound seemed too loud, like it had burst from a bigger space than my kitchen. I poured over a cheap black tea bag and watched the water turn the color of old pennies. Steam lifted, and for a second there was that smell again. Stronger. Smoke. but not seeking your clothes. Lavender, but tired. I carried the mug to the window. Outside, the rain had thinned to that slow drizzle that makes everything look like it's under glass. A bus growled past and hissed like it was angry at the wet. Streetlights reflected in the puddles in long needles. In the building across the street, a man in a tank top stood at his sink and did something with a knife and a potato, and I thought about how everyone is always doing small things that make up a life. Peeling potatoes, bleeding radiators, answering texts, opening strange envelopes. I remembered my grandmother had a tin of old cards and invitations from when people saved everything because paper meant something. I pictured her handwriting, looped Y's, a sharp T. When she died, the tin got lost in the shuffle of 100 small decisions. I should have kept it. That thought came hard and left me with a sudden ache behind my ribs. It made the smell make sense for a second, like maybe the card had come from someone like her, someone who thought lavender made the world nicer. I put the mug down and went back to my laptop. It was stubborn work, the kind you do when you're trying not to talk yourself out of being curious. I found a mention of the Blackwood Hotel's opening gala, 1927. I found a police blotter item from 1930 about a fight in the bar that ended in a broken bottle and 4 stitches. Then the big thing, a scan of a newspaper front page from March 1939. Midnight, blaze destroys Blackwood Hotel. 9 dead, several missing. The scan was crooked, and a coffee ring bled into the bottom corner like the past couldn't even keep its own stains straight. The article named the owner, Mr. A. Blackwood, and listed 2 bands that had performed in the ballroom over the winter. One paragraph said, "Witnesses report the fire moved like a dance, circling the room before rising to the chandeliers." I sat back and let that sentence sit with me. Like a dance. The idea tasted wrong and right at the same time. I looked up guest of honor Blackwood and got nothing useful. Then I tried 1938 Blackwood Halloween Ball. A city archive hit popped, a typed program with ribbon ink faded to purple, masquerade. The annual Halloween Ball, October 31st, 1938, Blackwood Hotel Ballroom. 4 numbers on the set list. Stardust, Bei mir bist du schon, Sing, Sing, Sing. The last one made my scalp prickle. You know how sometimes your body hears a song before your ears do? It was like that. My fingers started tapping a rhythm I didn't teach them. I told myself this was just a rabbit hole. One of those nights where you turn a weird thing into a project because your brain likes puzzles more than it likes quiet. Then why is your name on the card? The thought came in my own voice, sure, but it felt laid over with something thinner, like paper on paper. Who knew your middle initial? I took the card again and looked at the name, not just the initial. The slant. Whoever wrote it made the same odd notch on the top of the E that my 2nd grade teacher had warned me not to do, because it looked like a little hat. It wasn't my handwriting, but the detail annoyed me for reasons I couldn't catch. My apartment creaked. The radiator ticked like cooling tin. Down the hall, someone laughed too loud and then shushed themselves. The clock over the stove flipped from 9:11 to 9:12, and the tiny motor inside it buzzed for a second like a bug trapped under glass. I breathed. I tried to name the feeling, not fear exactly, not yet. It was the sense you get when a word is on the tip of your tongue and the air gets heavy around your mouth while you wait for it. I put on a sweater because the chill had settled and I was tired of pretending it was romantic. I texted you again. Actually might skip mix. Feel weird tonight. You wrote back, weird how? I typed like I got a party invite from 1938, then deleted it. I sent just tired instead. You did a thumbs up reaction and added the shrug emoji, which I misread as an insult, and then immediately felt stupid for misreading. My brain does that when it's grinding. I washed a mug because I needed a task that had edges. I dried it with the good towel. I stood there longer than the job required, hands flat on the counter, looking at the invitation like it might move. It didn't. Of course it didn't. I laughed, too loud in the quiet. You're being dramatic, I told myself, which is never something you tell yourself when you're actually calm. If this is the part where I say I decided to go, no, not yet. I did the sensible ritual of bedtime, teeth, face, an argument with a zipper. I put my phone on the nightstand, screen down. I leave it face up when I'm waiting for someone. I put it face down when I'm avoiding knowing something. That felt like a real confession. I turned off the living room lamp and the apartment lost its outline for a second, like the dark pressed a thumb to my pupils. In that second, the invitation's gold edge made its own light, not bright, just enough to say, I'm here. I'm here the way small things do. I took it with me to the bedroom because I didn't like the idea of it sitting alone in the dark. I set it on the dresser. The dresser is old, 4 drawers, one swollen so it sticks, and there's a mirror on top with silver behind the glass that started to rot in tiny freckles. I didn't look too long. The mirror in that light has a way of finding faces that aren't yours. That's not me being dramatic. It's a trick of angles and street lamps and the way neighbors' windows lay their squares on my wall. Still, I looked away, in bed, covers up, socks still on because I'd never warmed up. I listened to the building. Pipes thumped somewhere like distant footsteps. The rain thinned and then started up again as if the sky changed its mind. I thought about that ballroom set list again, and somewhere between one breath and the next I knew the shape of sing, sing, sing without the notes. Just the pattern it would make if sound could leave footprints. My right foot kept wanting to follow it. I told it to stop. It didn't. I almost fell asleep. I felt that soft drop inside where your thoughts lose their edges and become pictures. In that place, I saw a chandelier. It was the most ordinary chandelier. Crystal teardrops, brass arms like a stiff bouquet, but it moved the way a shoulder moves when someone laughs. I smelled lavender. I smelled smoke under it, like wood that isn't done with you yet. The chandelier tilted. The teardrops flashed gold, then red, then black, the way hot metal does. And there was a sound like a glass tapping to get a room's attention. I jerked awake because my apartment wasn't silent anymore. It was faint. It was so faint, I could have told myself it was the radiator deciding to be musical. But it wasn't. It was a band, a real band, the kind of band that breathes together, brass like sunlight folded into a horn, a drum that knew better than to be steady, a clarinet tracing a line up the wall of the room. It wasn't outside my window. It wasn't in the hall. It was somewhere just wrong enough that my skin didn't know where to goosebump first. I sat up and the mattress springs made their complaint. The music hiccuped and kept going. I went very still because I was afraid if I moved, it would stop, and then I'd have to live with having scared it away. I found my breath and held it the way you hold your breath under a bridge because someone told you to when you were a kid, and now you can't not. After a full minute, the song seemed to be coming from the wall where the dresser stood. No, not from it, through it, like the plaster was a curtain, and a room I couldn't see was on the other side. The mirror picked up a light that wasn't in my room and put it on my ceiling in slow, watery shapes. I swung my legs out of bed, cold floor, toes complaining, and stood. I walked to the dresser because that's what you do when something asks you to, and you don't know how to be rude to it. The invitation lay there like a well-behaved animal. The gold border asked for the light, and the light gave it. Okay, I said very quietly, very close to it, like I was telling a secret to a child. Okay, I hear you. I don't know why I did it, but I put 2 fingers on the card the way you might check a pulse. The paper was cool. The cool wasn't room cool. It was outside cool, like a porch rail at midnight. I stood there with my fingers on it and felt a thrum that was not my heartbeat, not fast, not slow, just waiting. I don't think I decided to go in that moment. Deciding would have made it too easy to blame me later. It felt more like remembering something I'd already agreed to a long time ago when my name was written in better penmanship. From the wall, the band laughed with their instruments, and the laugh ran its hands through the air and left a trail. I put the invitation back down very carefully, like it might bruise, and I said, because it felt like manners, I'll be there, not out loud, in my head where the polite things live. The music didn't answer exactly, but the beat nodded, and the faintest bell rang once, as if someone had lifted a glass and the room had quieted to listen. I got back in bed and pulled the covers to my chin and stared at the ceiling until the watery light faded and the radiator remembered its job and the building made its old building noises again. When sleep finally came, it came warm and smelled like lavender that someone had crushed between their fingers a long time ago and carried with them into a room full of people who would all be dead by morning. When I woke up, the room still smelled faintly of smoke. Not real smoke, just the ghost of it. The kind that hides in your clothes after a campfire or a dream that doesn't want to be forgotten. For a few minutes I stayed there, eyes open, waiting for the radiators ticking to prove I was still in my apartment and not wherever my head had gone last night. The invitation was right where I'd left it, on the dresser. No glow, no pulse, just paper again. I told myself I'd imagined it all, the music, the light, the bell. That kind of half-dream happens when your brain's too tired to stop spinning. I almost believed that. Almost. But when I picked up the card, there was a new line written across the bottom in the same perfect ink. 7 o'clock sharp, don't be late. I told myself I wasn't going. I said it out loud while brushing my teeth, like the mirror needed to hear it to make it true. I said it again while I made coffee I didn't want and watched the rain turn the street into a long dark ribbon. I even held the invitation above the trash and waited for a brave part of me to drop it. I didn't drop it. By late afternoon, the light went flat, like the sky had been erased and someone forgot to draw it back in. The radiator clanked once and went quiet. The apartment felt like a waiting room that didn't belong to any office. I kept the invitation in my coat pocket because I didn't trust it anywhere else. It made the whole coat feel heavier on that side, the way a sad thing can tilt your walk. "You're not going?" I said again, but softer, like I didn't want the invitation to overhear. When I finally left, I didn't tell myself where I was going. Keys, door, hallway, stairs. The building's lights flickered in a pattern that felt almost like Morse code. My car coughed to life. The wipers dragged across the windshield and left that sound like a sigh from something old. I didn't check the time. I kept my phone face down in the cup holder, like it owed me silence. The city blurred past in sheets of fog. Signs I knew by heart turned strange. Letters doubling back on themselves, neon making halos in the damp. The radio picked up nothing but soft static and a distant beat that kept trying to be music. I turned it off. The beat kept going, very faint, like my tires were rolling over the ghost of a drum line. When I got near the river, the fog thickened as if it remembered I was coming. The GPS dropped out. The last thing it said was turn right, and then it forgot what right meant. I drove slower. The road narrowed into a shape I didn't recognize, and then into a shape I did, for no good reason at all. The slight bend, the rail on the left with the missing bolt, the way the curb cut dips just before the corner. My hands knew when to turn without asking my head. I saw light before I saw the building, not the blue of storefronts, not the white stab of headlights. A warmer light, old and patient, the kind of gold you get from bulbs made to glow, not to show you what's wrong. Through the fog, the blackwood lifted itself out of nothing. It shouldn't have been there. Every picture I'd seen online showed brick skeletons and black beams like ribs. But this was whole. Arched windows, brass rails, Art Deco lines that made the night stand straighter. The letters over the awning burned steady. The Blackwood Hotel, each one with a small hum, like the sign loved saying its own name. I pulled to the curb because there was a curb to pull to now. Rain ticked on the hood like small, polite fingers. I sat with my hands on the wheel until the windshield fogged enough that the building softened into a smear of gold. When I opened the door, the fog came in fast, cold on my face, almost sweet on the tongue. A doorman stood under the awning where the light made a soft pool. Tall, coat with shiny buttons, hat with a neat band. He had one of those faces you don't notice until his eyes find yours. When they did, my stomach pulled tight, not from fear exactly, more like how you feel when someone you like says your name in a crowded room. "Good evening," he said. His voice sounded like it had been pressed onto a record and played back fresh. "Welcome back to the Blackwood." I didn't say my name. He didn't ask. He held out a tray lined with a dark cloth, and on it lay a row of masks like sleeping faces. He chose one without looking, ivory and gold, a half mask with a soft curve over the cheek. "For you," he said, "if you would be so kind." "I'm not." "This isn't real," I said. It came out wrong, too formal, like I was using words someone else had taught me. He smiled, careful and even. The skin around his mouth didn't quite know how to fold the way living skin folds. "We are very glad you could make it," he said. And the words slid past me and seemed to speak to the building. The mask was cool in my hand. The gold paint along the edge felt raised, tiny ridges under my thumb like a map. When I slipped the ribbon around my head, the world narrowed the right amount and then softened, the way a theater goes quiet when the lights dim for the good part. Inside smelled like a promise. Champagne, tobacco that had burned clean, perfume with powder under the flowers. The lobby's marble was the kind that remembers shoes. You could almost hear all the old footsteps if you listened to the shine. A chandelier hung low and heavy, 1,000 small drops of light held in a brass hand. I took 3 steps and felt my shoulders let go, like the air knew how to carry me better than the rain outside. The pianist in the corner played something slow to be polite. Behind it, under it, the band in the next room was tuning. Laughter in brass, a drum like a restless heart. Every sound came a half-breath after the movement that made it, as if the room liked to savor. At the bar, a man in white sleeves and a black vest polished a glass that was already clean. He looked up like we'd left off a conversation last winter. "Your usual?" he asked. I tried to find a joke. Nothing came to me. "Do I have one?" His grin was quick and kind. "Whiskey, neat." He set the glass on a napkin the color of old cream and bowed his head a little, like he'd given me something better than a drink. The first sip was warm in a way that had nothing to do with heat. Smoke, yes, and something soft behind it, lavender worn thin, like the last breath in a drawer that never opens. My throat worked, and the place behind my breastbone loosened. A woman in a silver dress leaned her hip to the bar. Her mask was a simple black shape that made her mouth look sacred. "I adore your tie," she said, and my hand rose to my collar even though I knew I hadn't worn a tie when I left home. My fingers found silk. I turned to the mirrored panel behind the bottles. The person in the glass wore a black suit, fitted to a body I didn't work hard enough to own. White gloves, hair sleeked back like an idea of a wave. He raised his glass just before I did. He smiled like he'd been practicing it. "No," I thought, but not in a scared way. More like, oh, like my mouth had remembered a word my mind hadn't learned yet. In the ballroom doorway, a host with a carnation pinned to his lapel clapped his hands once, and the sound rolled through the lobby like a tide. "Ladies and gentlemen," he called, bright as a bell, "shall we?" The music woke all the way up. Sing, 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 of course. It wasn't loud. It was full. It filled the corners of the air and made even the shadows stand tall, like they wanted to dance too. People moved through the doorway in pairs and threes, and I went with them, not because I chose to, but because the current wanted me and I was tired of swimming against small things. The ballroom opened like a mouth about to tell a secret. Light everywhere, golden and good-looking. Streamers that should have fallen years ago drifted down from the high ceiling and didn't seem to age. The band sat on a small stage, horns lifted like toasts. Drummer balanced on the point between steady and wild. a clarinetist with a mouth that knew how to smile while it worked. Couples spun, polite hands on backs, polite hands on hips, masks touching and parting, the sound of shoes that don't squeak because someone cared enough to fix them. Laughter flared and folded, said we are fine, said we have always been fine. I stepped onto the floor, and the wood gave a little, like it liked my weight. I did not dance. I did what you do at weddings, when you promise to start on the next song, and then don't. I let the edge of the crowd move me along, and I looked, and the looking felt like drinking water after salt. Then the glass slipped. It wasn't a panic thing. My fingers simply let go. The tumbler dropped from my hand, fell through gold, and passed into a quiet so large it took my breath. It should have shattered. Instead, it touched the floor and made no sound at all, not even a polite note. It vanished into the shine the way a coin disappears into deep water. I bent fast, embarrassed the way you get when you're the only one who hears yourself knock something over. There was nothing to pick up, only light, unbroken. When I stood, every dancer had paused mid-turn. Every mask faced me, still as portraits. The drum kept tapping. The horn drew in a breath that did not need lungs. Then they continued. Same steps, same laughter. The man in the gray suit passed the woman in the red dress at the same spot near the third column and tipped his head at the same moment, miniature and perfect. I watched for the difference and could not find one. I took a step back, and my heel touched a little rise in the floor, not a real step, a memory of a step. I moved left so I wouldn't trip again, and the step moved left with me so I would. At the far end of the room, the clock above the bandstand held its hands at 11:47 and looked pleased to be right. "Pardon?" a voice said close by. A gentleman in a dove-gray tuxedo with a mask of thin gold wire bowed as if we weren't in a hallway of bodies. The wire made his eyes look like neat coins. "You look well," he said, with the certainty of someone who'd seen me many times and liked the answer. "Do you remember the waltz?" "I don't dance," I said, which was a lie I have told in many places. He tilted his head as if I'd made a small joke. "Of course you do," he said, and then he was gone, already joining a woman whose perfume remembered violets better than real flowers do. A server passed with a tray of champagne that made tiny gold storms in every glass. "Your table is ready," she said to no one and to me. Her smile was sweet, the kind that forgives. Her fingers were smudged dark, like she'd pressed them against soot and wiped them clean, but the soot didn't want to let go. I moved along the wall, needing space. The mirrors there were tall and kind to faces, the kind you put up when you want people to feel like they chose the right suit. In each one, I was a fraction late to my own motion. My reflection buttoned a jacket I hadn't unbuttoned. He smoothed hair I hadn't touched. In one panel, for one blink, he lifted his hand and I saw the white glove char along the fingers. Edges curled, palm black like something had kissed it hard. I blinked again, and it was clean. My stomach rolled once, quiet. From somewhere near my shoulder, a voice I didn't know said, "You shouldn't have come back." The words were gentle, like advice you give a child you love. A hand found my sleeve. The pressure was light and left a print I could not see but felt. Powder-fine grit against the wool. I turned, and the man was already part of the room. Another bird mask, another neat bow. I looked for the doorway I'd come through and found a different one where it should have been. The corridor beyond it was bright and then dim, as if the electricity were breathing slow. I took a step toward it, and the smell of smoke got a small grip on the air. Not the heavy burn of a kitchen or a car, but the soft, fat smoke that rides the ceiling and waits. The band picked up the tempo like someone had told them a secret. Bodies closed, opened, closed. The clarinetist laughed through the mouth of the horn. The drummer made a mistake, and then made the mistake on purpose again, so it would feel like a choice. The ceiling's gold paint glowed a shade deeper, like heat under skin. I put my hand in my pocket and found the invitation like I was finding a pulse. It was warm, not hot. Warm the way a hand is warm when it has been holding another hand. This is not real, I told myself, but the part of me that listens to truth knew that wasn't the right kind of sentence for this room. This is yours, that part said instead, and I hated that it comforted me. I tested the exit. The bright corridor opened into a short hall that opened into another edge of the ballroom. Different angle, same song. The clock smiled, still at 11:47, as if it only knew one good face to make. May I? A woman in a blue dress I would have called midnight if midnight had more light in it reached for my hand. Her nails were perfect half-moons. Up close, her mask had hairline cracks the way China does when it's been loved. Her mouth smiled, and the skin at the edges of the smile didn't move. I started. You always say that, she said, and lifted my hand before I could take it back. The glove was mine, and it fit. We moved one step, then two, and the steps were waiting for me, not out there on the floor, but in me, a path I'd worn between one note and the next. Years ago, that had never quite smoothed over. We turned again. Her perfume was lavender and smoke at once, which made me think of drawers with sachets, and drawers made me think of bodies, and bodies made me think of the word kept, and nothing good ever follows kept. Do you remember the waltz? She asked. I said yes, and my mouth surprised me. When she let me go, the air was a little hotter. The chandelier flickered, not because it meant to, but because something moved through the light. A drop formed at the tip of one crystal, black and glossy. It fell and smeared in the air and didn't hit the floor the way drops do. The smell of smoke gentled and spread, a hand over a shoulder. I wanted the door, any door. I tried another hallway. It gave me a narrower view of the same joy. People laughed like they were proving something, and the laugh kept going half a beat after their mouths closed. A man in a white mask told a story I couldn't hear, and his hands drew the same circle 3 times, like he'd forgotten he'd already finished drawing it. At the far side, against a column, a photograph hung in a thin frame. The frame's gold had worn off where fingers had fixed it over the years. I stepped closer because seeing is the only trick I have. The glass held dust. The picture showed a room much like this one. The same clock, the same stage, people in masks with their bodies angled a little to the camera to look their best. Near the center stood a person with a mouth I already knew how to smile with. I leaned in, very close, so that my breath fogged a small cloud on the glass. The fog smelled like the invitation, smoke and lavender. The person in the photo wore the same black suit my reflection had been wearing. The eyes were mine, but softer, like the picture had decided to be kind. Someone had written across the bottom in ink that had faded to brown, Halloween, 1938, guest of honor. My first thought was mean, of course you were. My second thought was not a thought at all. It was a drop in the stomach and a soft, steady, oh, like I had been falling for a long time, and this was the floor that had always been there. "Are you enjoying yourself?" a voice asked, and the question came from everywhere the way heat does. I turned. No one stood close enough to claim it. The band rolled into a break and let the drummer talk too much. I was grateful to him for it. His hands flashed, and for a blink, his sleeves burned around the cuffs, and then didn't. I pressed my palm flat to my chest because I needed to feel something that belonged to me. There it was, beat and beat and beat, wrong only in that it wanted to match the drum and had to be persuaded not to. When I looked for the lobby had moved. That made sense in a bad way. Doors opened onto halls that opened onto doors that liked me enough to lead me back to the place where the trumpet always remembered how to climb. The doorman was not at his post. The place where he should have been held a thin column of fog that didn't bother to move. In it, I could see the awning the way you see a street through a rain-blurred window, and the street looked young. Lamps different, pavement too clean, rain falling in the neat straight lines that only happen in old films. A small bell rang once, as if someone had tapped a glass with the back of a spoon. The room leaned that way we lean when a toast is coming. My hand found the invitation again. The paper's edge bit the inside of my finger, and the sting was brief and good. A dot of blood rose. I wiped it on the inside of my cuff without thinking, and when I glanced down, there was no mark at all. "It knows you," something in me said, not to warn me, but the way you tell a person that a dog likes them, and they should stop pretending they don't want to be liked back. I stood there and let the music choose how I breathed. I let the lamps warm my face. I let the mirrors lie to me kindly. Somewhere, between the drum and the clock and the polite voices repeating their favorite lines, a quiet settled into the bones of the room. It felt like the pause between last step and bow. I didn't plan to come, I said to no one. The light along the ceiling deepened, satisfied. And in that moment, in that warm gold breath before whatever comes next, I realized I couldn't remember the drive anymore. I couldn't remember turning the key off. I couldn't remember locking the car. I could remember rain and a road that knew me and a voice saying welcome back in a tone that made the words feel like home. I lifted the invitation out of my pocket and smoothed its corner where it had bent. The ink looked wet, though it wasn't. The year on the card had the small flourish that has always made my chest ache for reasons I don't admit to people I like. 7 o'clock sharp, I said, as if reading it to a child. I'm here. The band laughed in a way that wasn't laughter and wasn't not. and the chandelier let go of another dark tear that did not fall, and the clock held both hands exactly where it wanted them. I took one step forward into the room that remembered me better than I remembered myself. I kept telling myself I was fine. That worked for about 5 breaths. Then my lungs started borrowing the drummer's rhythm and wouldn't give it back. In, out, tap, tap, tap. I tried to slow it. The room didn't let me. The band slid into a song I knew without knowing how. The brass laughed. The clarinet drew a line through the air like a finger on a fogged window. People moved as one body, masks bright, hands gentle. It almost felt holy. I stood at the edge and pretended I was only watching. The floor had a small give under my shoes, the way good wood does. Warm, too, like someone had stood here a minute before me and left heat behind in the grain. I shifted to my other foot. Same warmth. I told myself it was the lights. I told myself a lot of things. A server drifted past with champagne. The bubbles climbed, paused, then climbed again like someone was pressing play in little loops. For you, she said without asking. Her smile was soft, her fingers, though, dark smudges along the cuticles. Not dirt, something finer, the way ash gets under nails and refuses to leave. No thanks, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to the room, not to me. Near the bandstand, a couple spun the same half-turn twice. I blinked and watched them do it a third time. Same tilt of his head, same sweep of her blue dress, the cloth catching the light on the same crease. They looked so happy about it. That hurt for a reason I couldn't name. Do you remember the waltz? Someone asked behind me. I didn't turn. I don't dance, I said, out of habit. A second voice closer. You do. You always do. I looked then. The woman in the blue dress stood there, that china crack in her mask, now a little wider. Up close, I could see the tiny fractures in the enamel. Her eyes shone through them like water through cracked glass. Maybe later, I said. She tipped her head. Porcelain made a soft sound where it met skin. It is later, she said, and moved away with a hush, like a hem on wax. The chandeliers trembled, only a little. A drip formed at the point of one crystal, black and glossy like a beetle. It let go. I waited for a sound. Nothing. The drip did not land. It hung there for one long breath, then thinned in the air, and drew a faint streak I could smell more than see. Smoke, braided with perfume. I kept pretending. People spoke around me, but the words didn't carry right. They arrived late, like voices mailed from another room. Laughter held a second too long, as if it wanted to see what would happen if it didn't stop. I could tell the exact spot on the floor where every joke would end. Just there, by the third column, because I'd already heard it end there. Twice. I tried the door I thought led back to the lobby. It opened onto another slice of the same ballroom, different angle, same bandstand, same clock with both hands kissing 11:47 like it was proud of itself. A man in a dove-gray tuxedo passed me, bird mask thin as wire, and left a small print of grit on my sleeve where he brushed my arm. You shouldn't have come back, he said, almost kind. The ball doesn't forget. Back from where? I asked. He looked surprised, as if I'd mispronounced my own name. From the hall, he said, and meant something larger than a hallway. Then he was gone, absorbed by the light like breath in cold. The mirrors along the wall were polite at first. They let me be handsome in a way I've never been. My suit, tight, clean, like I'd been fitted by someone who loved me. Hair slicked like a black wave. The white glove on my left hand sat smooth as a promise. Then the mirror on the end hiccuped the light. For one short frame, my glove charred along the fingers, edges curled like paper kissed by a match. The skin beneath went dark and then peeled back to gray. I blinked hard. Clean glove, fine suit, a small tremor in my right hand that didn't match the music. You're tired. You're hungry. You're making ghosts out of shine. I told myself that and almost believed it. Almost. The band leaned into sing, sing, sing. The snare found that old grin and ran with it. People clapped on 2 and 4 like they remembered how, even if they didn't know why. The heat thickened at the ceiling, grew a color, gold with red behind it, the way a stovetop coil looks a second before glow. The air tasted sweet, then metal, sweet, then metal, like breath over a coin. I wanted out, not because I was afraid, but because I suddenly needed to stand somewhere ordinary, somewhere a floor was only a floor and a clock was only a promise. I picked another door, then another. Every corridor fed me back to music, to masks, to the grand way a hall wants to seem bigger when it knows it's being seen. Your table is ready, a server told me as I passed. The tray on her hand was empty. I didn't ask for a table. You asked last year, she said, gentle as if she were reminding me to drink water, and her voice made a shape in my head that felt like a chair by a window I'd loved once. My chest pulled tight. In the corner near the stage, a gramophone sat like a pet left to guard the house. The platter spun without a record and still managed to make a small music of its own. Needle scratching nothing. A whisper that sounded like again. A line formed near the center. Couples faced couples. For a moment, I thought they were about to bow to one another like in a reel, but they only stood, hands poised, smiling that fixed smile, waiting for something to start that had already started. Their chests lifted and fell together like birds on a wire in wind. The blue dress woman found me again. She took my hand before I knew I was giving it. Her fingers were cool through the glove, then warmer, like a fever waking up slow. "Do you," she began. "Remember the waltz," I said with her, because my mouth knew the rest of the line. She laughed, and a gray smear caught at the corner of her teeth and then was gone. We stepped, left, right, turn. My feet didn't ask me for permission. They went where they had gone 100 times on a floor that had been this floor, and also not. There was a moment, just a breath, where the room peeled back, and I saw the same dance in a different heat. Bodies moving because stopping would have hurt more. Laughter bright as kindling, the air already turning mean. I stumbled. She steadied me with a palm to my chest. Through the glove, through the front of the suit, I felt my heartbeat answer to the snare. "Easy," she said. "You always take the first turn too fast." "When?" I asked. I meant what year. I meant what life. She blinked slow, kind. "Don't be silly." Her perfume was lavender, thin and old and stubborn. It felt like a door left open on a warm night. It felt like a drawer with a sachet. And the word drawer pulled a thread through my head to the word kept. And that word did not like me much. We broke. She folded back into the tide. I stood where she'd left me and let the crowd move around my stillness. In the mirror opposite, my mouth kept smiling a beat too long. I watched it stop and then felt my lips follow. Late. "Welcome back," someone said near my ear. The breath was cool. When I turned, there was only a shape in a black mask touching the place where a door should be and finding wood that was not a door at all. I needed proof that something existed outside the song. I found a small lounge off the ballroom, the kind of room built for coats and whispered fights. The lights were lower. A faint scorch traced the baseboards, like a shadow had once tried to learn how to burn. A picture hung crooked over a couch gone long. I stood the frame straight without thinking and left a clean fingerprint in the dust border, round and sharp and wrong because there was no dust on my glove. The photograph was of a Halloween party, not this one, but exactly this one. The same bandstand, the same clock. Faces in masks turned 3/4 to the camera in that flattering way. Someone had written Halloween 1938 along the white edge in ink that had bled a little, brown now, but sure of itself. Near the middle stood a person in a black suit, glove on the left hand, chin tipped like he knew. My eyes found his eyes and didn't have to work hard. They were mine. The gramophone in the corner cleared its throat. The platter made that dry hush sound. Then, through the hush, a voice that must have been a voice once found a shape again. "We dance until the last guest returns." The skin along my forearms went tight, hot, then cold. I reached out and touched the glass over the photo. The pain fogged under my breath. The fog smelled like the invitation, smoke and lavender. My finger left a clear shape on the glass. When I lifted it away, a smear of gray clung to the glove and then wasn't there. "You knew this," something in me said. "You've known it a long time." I wanted to argue with that. I didn't have a good argument. Back in the ballroom, the heat had climbed an inch closer to the ceiling. The chandeliers had learned a new tremble. The black drops fell more often now and still did not land. The clock loved 11:47 so much it refused everything else. People danced like joy was a job. They laughed like they were getting paid by the sound. The band held the room the way a hand holds a small bird, gentle until it needs not to be. I watched the drummer roll through a fill. For a blink his cuff smoked at the edges. He didn't notice. The dove-gray man brushed me again on his pass. "Truly," he said, softer now, a little sore in the throat. "You shouldn't have come back. The ball keeps its promises." "What promises?" I asked. He looked down at his hands like he'd misplaced something and couldn't remember the shape of it. "Names," he said. "Doors." Then his jaw worked like it wanted to say keys and decided not to. I tried one last exit, because hope is a bad habit I haven't broken. The door opened onto a hall that was all light and no temperature. At the end of it was another door. I walked. My shoes made no sound. I opened the second door and stepped into the same band playing the same bar they'd been playing the whole time I'd been gone. The room welcomed me the way rooms do in dreams, without moving, without changing, as if I'd never left. I hated the relief that came with that. A bell rang once, small and clean, the way a spoon taps a glass to ask for a toast. Conversations paused mid-breath, heads tilted. In the high corner near the crown molding, smoke gathered itself into a thin ribbon and went nowhere. It just was. I put my hand in my pocket and found the invitation like a worry stone. The paper was warm again. A corner had bent. I smoothed it. You see it now, I thought, and it felt like telling the truth to a friend. You see what this is. The room answered by holding me a little closer, not with arms, with time. The music pressed my lungs into the shape it preferred. My tongue tasted lavender that had been through fire and kept its manners anyway. The mirrors loved me, and I hated them for being so good at it. The clock stayed faithful to its 1 minute, as if the rest of the night had heard it once, and it wouldn't be fooled again. I remember I said into the heat that wasn't heat. I didn't say what. I didn't need to. The band hit the next phrase as if we had practiced it together. I tried to think of my apartment, the radiator, the chipped bowl by the door, the way the hall light in my building coughs before it gives in. The memory slid off like water on wax. This room kept what it wanted, and it wanted me. Not because I was special, because I was expected. Welcome home, the woman in blue said from somewhere close and kind, and that word home landed in a place under my ribs that had been empty for a long time. I looked up at the chandeliers and watched another black tear learn how not to fall. I listened to the drums breathe for me. I felt the floor remember the shape of my weight. I stopped pretending I was only watching. The music slipped first, not a wrong note, a breath that didn't belong to the song. The clarinet held on too long, like it didn't want to be alone, and the drummer answered with a soft roll that sounded like rain on a hot roof. The air thickened, not hotter yet, just heavier, the way a room feels before a storm, when the walls need you to be quiet. I took a breath, and it sat in my lungs like I'd swallowed a wool sleeve. Someone near the band laughed at the wrong time. The sound broke in the middle and came back as a cough. A sweet smell rose and turned, lavender with the fat of something that shouldn't have fat. My throat closed against it and then opened like I'd agreed. Easy, said no one. The word seemed to come from the room itself, from the brass rails, from the chandelier arms, from the gramophone in the small lounge with its platter spinning nothing at all. The gramophone found a voice. It started as a scratch, the needle dragging across a groove that wasn't there. Then a tone, old and warm, deep as a cellar. Then words, clear in a way that didn't need any throat to make them. Good evening, guests. A hush moved through the crowd, like a wave washing a row of shells and setting them straighter. People turned without meaning to. I did too. Forgive the delay, the voice said. It had the soft smile of a man who's good at being looked at. There was a dry rasp under it, like the paper sleeve of a 78 turning in your hands. We're so pleased to have you, all of you. The chandeliers trembled. One crystal shed a black tear that did not fall. The clock, faithful as ever, held both hands to 11:47 and looked proud. I know you, I said, very small, very wrong. My voice didn't carry. It didn't need to. The room heard me. Of course, The gramophone answered, cheerful, fond, burnt at the edges. Mr. Blackwood always knows his guests, especially the ones who keep their promises. A shape bled out of the smoke above the bandstand the way ink finds paper. Not a man at first, a suggestion of shoulders, a tilt of a head, the memory of a lapel pin bright as a fresh coin. Then the rest, piece by piece, like a photograph in developer. Hair silvered at the temples, eyes that held light the way coals hold heat, a mouth that had practiced mercy and learned how to love it. He didn't step down. He simply was, at the edge of the stage, as if the room had remembered how to draw him. When he smiled, the crowd smiled back, the way people do when someone asks them to enjoy themselves and they're already trying. "We have a tradition here," he said. He spoke to all of us but looked right at me. "We dance until the last guest returns." The sentence landed like a glove on my shoulder. Polite, firm, familiar. "I shouldn't be here," I said, and didn't sound sure about any of those words. "Now," he said, soft, pleased, "isn't that just like you? Always pretending you've lost the step." He gestured to the band with 2 fingers, and the horns inhaled together. "But you never do, not when it counts." Heat gathered in the corners the way dust does. It wasn't temperature yet. It was color first. Gold deeper than before, red under the gold like a wound turning. The scent of old smoke braided through the suite. Someone fanned themselves with a program, and I read the headline without meaning to. Masquerade Set List, October 31st, 1938. The ink had bled where a wet thumb had pressed it once, hard. "Do you?" I started, and didn't know what the question was. "Remember?" he supplied, kind enough to save me from the middle of my own sentence. He tilted his head, and the line of his mouth flickered at the corners, as if heat were already licking there. "You always do." A dancer near me lifted her mask to wipe her eyes. Her lashes came away black on her glove, and the skin beneath the mask shone wrong, smooth as glaze where skin should fold. She smiled at me with the mouth of a living woman and the patience of someone who had waited through 87 winters for a song to loop back to the good part. "Look," someone said, and I did, because there was nowhere else to put my eyes. On the far wall, between 2 mirrors that had been kind to me, a frame hung crooked. I knew it already, the photograph. I wanted to pretend I didn't. My feet didn't let me. I crossed the floor like a kid called by a teacher who knew the answer before the question. The frame had been straightened and crooked so often the gold had worn down to the tin beneath along the edges where fingers like mine had touched, set, lifted away. The glass held a skin of fine soot no one had cleaned because it would be rude to take the past out of a picture. I wiped a circle with my knuckle and left no mark on my glove. Halloween 1938, written across the bottom in a tidy hand that had believed in the right way to make a 3. The stage, this stage, the clock, this frozen minute, masks and faces angled 3/4 for the camera the way people were taught to stand when they wanted to be remembered well. Near the center, a black suit, a white glove on the left hand, a chin tipped the way I tip mine when I am showing off without meaning to. You. It wasn't a thought, it was a name. It didn't feel like it belonged to me, and it didn't feel like it didn't. My hand rose to the glass because That's what hands do when they want to touch proof. The pain fogged under my breath and smelled like the envelope, smoke and lavender, both of them tired, neither willing to stop being what they were. A sound came back, not from the gramophone, not from the band, not from Blackwood's mouth, from inside my head where songs go to keep warm. The doors. I remembered the weight first. The brass bars across both leaves, heavy in the hand when you lift them, heavier when the heat swells the wood and the metal doesn't want to learn a new shape. I remembered how the handle burns you, and you say damn and you laugh because everyone's laughing, and isn't that funny? Imagine that. I remembered a voice, mine but younger, stronger, full of a job to do. Keep them closed, it said, and meant keep the world on the other side safe. It meant don't let it out. It meant we can hold this here. I saw my white glove go dark where brass kissed it long, my palm blistering neat like a lesson. I saw a woman in a blue dress turn and turn with a smile that didn't know what the heat was yet, only that the band sounded so good when it had to. I locked them, I said, and the words were small and honest and didn't try to save me. My throat tried to close and didn't. I locked the doors. Blackwood stood very still, as if stillness could be a kind of bow. The light caught his cheek and showed me where the skin had learned to crack and then learned to hold the crack with grace. You kept us together, he said, and there was no mockery in it, only approval, as if I had set tables well, as if I had remembered to check the linens, as if I had done what a good guest does. You kept the dance from spilling into the street. You spared the city a very ugly sight. That's not, I started, and couldn't find the end of the sentence because both ends were true. I meant to help. I hurt them. The thought held both hands in mine and pulled until I felt something in the middle give. The band played softer now, like the room had ears that were tired. The drummer's hands blurred, and for a breath his cuffs smoked, then didn't. The clarinet sobbed a pretty note and made it seem fine. A server passed with a tray, and every glass was full of gold that did not move unless you looked away. The chandeliers trembled like animals in a storm. Heat finally found temperature. A slow climb. Back of the knees warmth. The kind of heat that licks first and waits to see if you will flinch. The perfume in the air went syrup thick, buried something under it. Laughter arrived late to mouths and left early like it had somewhere else to be. Why call me back? My voice wobbled and I let it. Don't be brave. Being brave is how you lie to the part of you that needs help. Why not let it end? Blackwood's eyes were bright and patient. Because it does not end, he said. Not for us. Not until the last guest returns and the figures are complete. He spread his hands, host to a miracle or a ruin. We are a set. We are a night. We are a list of names. We don't break. I left, I said, though even as I said it, it felt like telling a story my mouth didn't believe. I lived a life. I tried to grab images, the chipped bowl by the door, the radiator that ticks, the man across the street peeling potatoes, the text I didn't send because it sounded ridiculous. For a moment they were bright, then the room exhaled and they ran off the table like water. You were borrowed, he said gently, like a doctor telling me the truth and keeping his hands warm. A life on loan is still a kind of life, but a debt is a door, And doors. He smiled with real pleasure. Doors are your specialty. Something low popped in the walls. Paint cracked along a seam, high near the molding, and left a thin black line like a drawn-on vein. The mirrors showed the room handsome and didn't show the line. The clock kept perfect faith with its 1 minute, unbothered by how long it had been true. A couple near the stage started the waltz without the band, as if they'd been waiting for permission from a year I couldn't reach with my hands. He turned her, and the blue dress lifted and spread like water when you drop a ring into it. For a blink, their faces weren't faces at all, just the fine white of bone under a thin smile. And then they were lovely again, and too polite to mention the slip. "I don't want," I said, and shook my head because want didn't help here. It felt like taking a raincoat to a house fire. My mouth was a small, soft thing. The room had a better mouth. Blackwood stepped close enough that I could smell him. Cologne turned to smoke. Smoke turned to memory. Memory turned to lavender because the body likes to make mercy out of what it can. "I know," he said. His voice crackled once. A log shifting in a grate you forgot to put out. But we don't ask the music if it would like to stop. We ask if we know the steps. The gramophone in the small room behind us found that sentence funny and let the needle laugh once across its empty groove. We dance until the last guest returns. It hummed, satisfied to be right every time. I looked down at my left glove. The white had gone gray at the palm, the way flour darkens when you press it to a hot pan. I flexed my fingers, and the glove tightened like a second skin that remembered a better hand. The suit fit me well because it had always fit me. The mirrors told me I belonged here, and I wanted to hate them, and I also wanted to let them be kind. I thought of my door at home, the slot near the bottom where the envelope had snagged, the chipped bowl, the good towel, the text I didn't send. I put my hand on my chest to feel my heart argue with the drum. I let it loose. "Come," Mr. Blackwood said, and offered me nothing. No hand, no command. Just the weight of a host's invitation, the sort you're raised to accept because someone has gone to trouble, and it's rude to refuse. The chandeliers shed another black tear that learned how not to fall. Heat climbed into the drapes. The edges of the room went soft with it, as if distance were made of butter. The band lifted their horns. The drummer grinned like fear and joy had always been cousins. "I remember," I said, and the truth didn't make anything easier. It made the ground steadier, which is worse. I remember the waltz. The sentence was an old coat. I put it on. It knew my shoulders. "It's been 87 years, Blackwood said, proud of the number, the way a child is proud of candles they get to blow out. His edges smoked and held. "Welcome back." "No, that's what I meant to say. Please, that's what my throat made." My feet did something older. They took the first step the way they always had. Left, right, turn. The band came in like a door, opening onto heat you knew by name. The clock watched us from its small, high place, where minutes can choose who they keep. The mirrors offered me my best face and my worst, and asked which one I wanted to take with me. The fire rose without rushing. Good hosts don't hurry you. It reached and found the oil in the wood and taught it a song. It found the silk and told it how to glow. It found the people and reminded them they were made of things that remember flame. The lavender in the air curled into itself and made a sweeter, sadder scent. I stepped once more to be certain I still could. I did. And as the room learned how to burn again, as the music learned how to breathe for every chest at once, I understood the shape of what came next. Not rescue, not mercy, a circle, a figure, a night that had memorized its own steps. I closed my eyes, not to hide, to listen. The drum said here, the horn said now, the gramophone said again. I lifted my hand to where a partner would be, and the air took it like it had been waiting all this time. The fire didn't rush in. It grew, curious, deliberate, like it had been waiting for permission to return. At first it was only warmth, a pulse beneath the floorboards, a low throb through the wood, keeping time with the band. The heat found seams in the wallpaper and slipped through them like fingers tracing an old scar. The chandeliers started to sweat light. Their gold arms softened, sagging under their own glow, droplets of glass melting into honey-thick tears. Smoke lifted from the edges of the curtains, white first, then blue, then the deep orange of a breath held too long. The scent came next. Lavender, split open by flame. Sweet at first, then blackened, filling my mouth with the taste of warmth itself. Every dancer shone, not burned, shone. Skin turned translucent, then embered from beneath. You could see the outlines of bones, glowing faintly like filaments inside porcelain dolls. Dresses flared in silence, folds of fabric blooming into fire so bright it hurt to look at. The colors didn't die, they sang. The band never faltered. The brass swelled, full and alive. The drummer's sticks flicked sparks from the snare, each hit blooming a tiny star before vanishing into the heat. Trumpets gleamed like molten gold. The floor was a mirror of smoke, reflecting light that wasn't there a moment ago. Mr. Blackwood raised his glass. Flames crawled gently up his sleeve, licking the fabric but never consuming it, as if the fire respected him too much to destroy him. His smile remained polished, patient. To those who kept the figure, he said. His voice sounded like a log cracking, old, hollow, and full of light. To those who return, the room answered, 100 voices overlapping, smoke pouring from every mouth as they spoke. I tried to breathe, but the air was velvet, too thick, too sweet. The floorboards beneath me began to glow faintly red, lines of heat running between the planks like veins remembering blood. My shoes smoked where they touched the boards, the leather curling away like petals. The woman in blue took my hand, her glove caught, and for a heartbeat, our joined hands burned, one shape, one color, one small sun between us. Her eyes glowed through the cracks in her mask. "Don't be afraid," she said, though the sound came from inside my chest. We spun. The air broke open. Fire leapt up the pillars, climbed the mirrors, curled across the ceiling. It didn't move like destruction. It moved like choreography. Every tongue of flame followed the rhythm, bending on the beat, turning with the dancers. It painted our shadows in gold and black, our faces glowing like saints caught mid-hymn. The chandeliers finally gave up. They fell in slow arcs, scattering molten light across the floor. The crystals hit the ground and burst into sparks that drifted upward again. defying gravity, like souls too stubborn to settle. The smoke thickened, a living fabric. I could feel it pressing against my face, warm and soft, whispering shapes in my ear. You kept the doors closed. You kept the dance alive. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell it I was sorry, but the words melted before they left my mouth. Around me, the room blurred to a single color, orange so deep it was almost red, almost black. The fire bent toward me, reaching like an old friend. I could feel its hunger, but not for flesh. It wanted memory. It wanted to keep the story burning, and I let it. It reached my throat and didn't hurt. The heat moved through me the way breath does through glass before it cools to shape. My chest flickered. My heart was a candle caught in wind. Across the room, Blackwood bowed. The flames kissed his face and left trails of light instead of scars. "You see," he said. His voice was a whisper made of wood cracking. "We were never ghosts. We were embers." The band climbed toward its last impossible crescendo. Horns screamed, drums rolled, fire roared back in time. Every step we took threw sparks from the soles of our shoes, our laughter braided with the sound of collapsing beams. And in the center of that ruin, I could see the dance as it once was. The lights, the laughter, the promise that the night would never end. And we had kept it. We had kept it. When I fell, it wasn't downward, it was inward, into a light so bright it forgot what color was. The last thing I saw before the world folded was the woman's face, cracking, glowing, smiling. "Welcome home," she said. Then she vanished in a burst of white fire. When I woke, the room was ash. The air tasted like rain and ghosts. I wasn't sure if I'd lived through it or burned inside it, but the smoke still curled from my sleeves, as if reluctant to let me go. The invitation waited on the dresser. The gold border shimmered faintly in the morning light, unburned, untouchable. I turned it over, and the ink had changed again. Now the letters were written in cinder-gray script, soft and perfect. "Thank you for attending the 1938 Blackwood Halloween Ball. Next year, we dance again." Outside, the sky was orange, not sunrise, not flame. Something between, and somewhere, through the walls, a faint saxophone started to play. Slow, patient, eternal